So today we hear this beautiful gospel reading about the paralytic, and you'll see the icon that's in the bulletin where he's got his bed high above his head as a sign that he's not just healed, but he's also strong. You know, many times when we go to a doctor or whatever, we have a surgery, we come out of that surgery and we feel weak. We feel this need to recover and this time we have to take off and therapy and all these other things. We see that the man in the gospel reading today, in the iconic form as it's written, has his pallet high above his head as if his strength is completely restored and he is no longer suffering, he is no longer weak, he is no longer broken. But one of the interesting things about the gospel reading today is that this man had been waiting by, as you see in the back of the icon, there's those arches. And so there was this water that became troubled, and what troubled means, not like what we think troubled means, but it became like agitated water. And those who would go into the water were healed. So it was a miraculous area, and the man was sitting there, but he had been sitting there for so many years, just laying on the side, probably collecting food from people who passed by, and never had anyone to pick him up to put him in there. But what he did want was healing. So he would stay there, he would have patience, he would have faith that someday he would be able to go into the water and to be healed. But it didn't take the water to heal him, it took Christ to heal him. So he waited all those years for that particular event to happen with the water. But it wasn't the event of the water that healed him. It was the presence of Christ that healed him. Now, if we think about our understanding in the church and why we're here and what we're really seeking, everybody's seeking healing in one way or another. Spiritual healing, physical, psychological, emotional, family healing, whatever it is, we're all seeking some type of healing. And we come to church just as this man did. He sat for so many years just waiting for something to happen. Waiting for this event to happen. And I think sometimes we think that in the church too, that we can come to church and we say, well, there's going to be some event that's going to happen that's going to make everything better, that I'm going to be healed, that things are going to change for my life. And that event, whatever it is going to make things better for me. But we have to really pull ourselves away from thinking of an event and thinking of a relationship are two different things. It's one thing to say, well, you know, someday, or for those who are married, that meeting your spouse was an event. All right, it was a moment in time, but it wasn't an event. Or having kids, or being born yourself was a moment in time. It was an event, but what happens after that? What happens after that? The relationship happens. We're all children in here, unless you have some story I don't know about. You were all born, and you all have parents who raised you. You might have your own children. There was some kind of connection that is beyond an event. So what we see today in the gospel reading is that this man waited for this particular thing to happen. But what it took was the presence of Christ. So in our lives here in the church, we have to always look past just coming to church as a formality and waiting for something magical to happen. And we have to reach out to the relationship with Christ. That's the only thing that heals us. So if we come for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, our entire life, and do not have a relationship with Christ, we cannot expect to be healed. It's not some magical event. It's a relationship. So in today's gospel, we hear that it's the presence of Christ in the midst of the person's faith. So this man had faith. He didn't really know what he had faith in outside of the fact that God was present somehow and healed people in this water. He had seen it. He had probably seen it many times and was just unable to get to it, which makes things even worse, right? If you think about your life and the things that you can't achieve, many times you long for those things much more than the things that you wanted and that you achieved and that now you're past and now you move on to something else. So this man had this deep desire for healing. And then Christ says, what do you want? What are you here for? Again, to hear, I want to be healed. And then Christ sees the faith in the man, sees that perseverance, sees that endurance that he had, and says, take up your pallet and go home. But the man doesn't say, gee, who are you? He doesn't say, and by what power do you have? Are you sure? I've been here for 38 years. I'm not sure that this is going to happen. And then we don't hear that from the man. But another thing that we don't hear from Christ that we hear many times is, your sins are forgiven, your faith has made you well. We don't hear that challenge of faith to this man because Christ sees that this man has been there. He's got no place to go except to sit there and pray that someone's going to pick him up and move him in to the water. But then what does Christ do after he heals him? He says, take up your pallet and go home. And then where does he find the man again? He finds him after Christ withdraws. So the man goes in there. He's probably like, hey, I can move. He's walking around. He's got his pallet. He's ready to go home, tell his parents. He turns around and Christ is gone. He just kind of withdraws into the crowd. So then Christ, where does he find him again? Which is the other beautiful thing about the understanding of this man's faith. He finds him where? In the temple. He finds him praying in the temple. And he goes up to him and says, you could just see this and say, hey, remember me? And I'm sure the man said, yes, I do. And he said, be careful, don't sin so that nothing worse befalls you, so that nothing worse comes upon you, because sin is the ultimate problem. So he knows the man's faith. He knows that he's trying. He knows he's in the temple. But what is the worst that is going to befall him? It's not that his arm is going to just drop off or his leg is going to fall off or something. The worst is don't sin so that you don't destroy the presence of the miracle of Christ in you. Now that's a lesson for all of us, to be careful of sin, because the ultimate bad thing that can happen to us is spiritual death. When we die towards our relationship with Christ. So that's what he says. Don't sin so that you don't destroy the fact that you acknowledge Christ in his immediate interaction. He knew that was God. He didn't question him. There was no questioning. There was no asking, who are you? There was no, are you sure? There was no questioning of the man himself and saying, well, I don't think I can do this. He just does it. He just follows God's words. So Christ says, don't sin. Be careful, because now that you've been healed, how easy is it? How easy is it for all of us to go back to the way we were? It's very interesting. There's this one story that I've told of a person who was in a serious car accident many years ago. Came to church in a wheelchair months after, and came to church in crutches after that. Then he came with a walker. Then he came walking on his own 2 feet. And then what? Then he didn't come again. Why? Because people fall back into the way they were. And many times, the only time that, or is a priest, and there's priests throughout the country that meet people for the first time when they're on their deathbed. And they're saying, oh, gee, and you get the call, so-and-so's in the hospital, and you're like, I don't know this person. And you go see them, and they're all fired up about God. God this, God that. Oh, I got a confession, I need communion, give me unction. Whatever you got in your trick bag, right? Well, open the bag and give me whatever you got because I need it. And then what happens? If they're healed, sometimes after that, we do the funeral service. And sometimes after that, we don't see the person. We don't see him. And I know because I don't see him. And I know who's here. And that's the sad part, is that once the healing comes, once the achievement comes, it's very easy to fall back into our sinful ways, to fall away from God and then forget about what he's done for us. And then what? Then we go back into the old ways of not acknowledging God immediately, not trusting in him, not having faith in him. And then we go into the worst sin, which becomes that spiritual abandonment from Christ and our spiritual death. So that's why Christ says to the man, don't sin, be careful, because now you've been healed. All those years of waiting, you finally got what you wanted. And now that you finally got what you wanted, be careful that you don't do things that you don't want to do. Because it's very easy for us, as humans to sit and to think about something that preoccupies us and takes us completely zoned into focusing on God. Guaranteed. If somebody came in here today and said, I just wanted to greet the parish, and everyone who's here today has approximately 18 hours to live. Believe me, we would all be thinking a little bit different about how we were going to spend our Sunday. Are we going to cut the grass? Are we going to go on a fishing trip by ourselves? Are we going to worry about cleaning the house? Are we going to worry about what we're having for dinner? You would think completely different. And then when hour 19 came, you'd be thinking even more, oh, I got to focus more about God. And then hour 20, and then 21, and you're still going, and you're like, my time is up. I'm on borrowed time. And then what happens? Then a day passes, then another day, and you're still in that zone. And then that person comes the following Sunday and says, you know what, I came to the wrong church. I actually had to go to the one on 5th and Farnsworth. I'm really sorry. You're all good. Then what happens? You go home, you cut your grass, right? You go back to your lives, right? Isn't that what they say all the time? Go back to your lives, citizens, for those who have seen Toy Story or any other things. I mean, it's you go back to the humdrum. The calling today in the gospel reading is not to go back to the old ways, but to live with that immediacy of the need for Christ in your life. To want that presence, to reach out for it, to grab it, to hold on to it, and don't let the humdrum or the fact that you might not feel that imminent need for Christ in your life to come and to grab you and pull you away and to take you away. That's what Christ is warning this man today. Don't let the average life that you now lead, that life of healing, pull you away into sin. So why is it said now during this Paschal season? Every year, it's this Sunday after Easter that we read this is because now we're getting into the point where, okay, we sing Christos Anesti, everybody's guaranteed we don't sing it like we sang it on Anastasi, right? When the lights go and we sing Christos and everybody's like, yeah, Lamb, right? Maybe not. Or whatever. You get excited. You're thinking about the transformation. Lent is over. The church is bright. We did it. Christ is risen. You think about people who have died. You think about the people that you have in your life. You think about the future. You think about all those things, and you're so excited as you hold your candle up and you try and get that candlelight home. And you work to get it home. And then what happens? You get it home. Do you still have it going in your house? That's the question. Do you still have it going? Did you transfer from one candle to the next candle to the next candle? Is it burning in your kitchen right now? Or is it out? Is it that important still, or is it not? Was it just 1 week? Was it just the day? Or did you bless your doorway with the sign of the cross with the smoke and then blow it out, and then that's it? Is it burning in your home? That's what that light is on the altar table, that 7-day candle. That's the Easter light. So if you don't have it burning in your home, buy a candle after church, come up to the front of the church, wait in the front, and I'll give you the light to take back in your home. Because if you don't have it burning as a simple gesture in your home, then how do you have it burning in your heart? How do we transform that so that every time you walk past wherever it is in your home and you see that light, you think, yes, Christ is risen. Christos Anesti, and you say it to your family members and you think it, and as you go about your day, you see that candle. And the best place, I think, is probably in your kitchen somewhere where you can see it, because everybody runs through the kitchen at one point or another, and they'll see that light. But that's the warning for us today. Don't go back to the old ways. Don't let that immediacy and that imminent need for Christ leave you. Because if we do, then much worse things will happen to us. And the worst thing that can happen to us, obviously, is spiritual death. So rekindle the flame in yourself for this Paschal season. Bring the light home if you don't have it home. If you have it home and you need to transfer it, go buy another candle. Buy a 7-day candle. If you don't want a 7-day candle, go buy a Yankee candle or something. If you want to smell nice, you want the flame to smell, and you walk in and you smell that flame. Whatever. Make sure you have it burning in your home for these 40 days, because it's an important thing for us to remind ourselves that Christ is risen, and He rose each and every one of us with Him. So this transformed life, we can't go back to the old, but we need to stay with the new. Amen.